So first off, so glad and excited to have so many new faces this workshop. We somehow it got well, I think the social media and the power of the networks that you all are a part of, especially Trina, Emily, and Jazzmyn. We have lots of new faces joining us who I think for many of you it's your first Watershed Solutions Network workshop. I'm going to do a quick introduction of Watershed Solutions Network. We are a small nonprofit and we cultivate communities equitably stewarding thriving watersheds. That might sound canned. It's because we just had our first strategic plan approved. But basically, what we're working to do is to build the collaborative capacity and the relationships that we think are necessary to manage our resources at scale. And everything we do, we start by centering equity. We started as a small, as an intensive cohort experience where we brought people together across a region or across the state, and the curriculum included lots of opportunities to learn things like good communication skills and systems thinking, and to build collaborative capacity. And we also hold a set of values that I'll share for folks who are joining us for the first time. One value that we hold that I would strongly invite and encourage um, participants to honor is something we call contextual confidentiality. And what we mean by that is that you're here experiencing this workshop, and we want you to carry forward what you are learning, but we don't want you to carry forward other people's stories. So that goes for everything that Trina and Emily and Jazzmyn share, and it also goes for things you might hear from people in breakout sessions. So please take to heart what you learn, and then please be very conscious of not telling someone else's story. We also invite folks to listen with curiosity, especially when something makes you feel uncomfortable. Oftentimes, when you feel that initial feeling of resistance, that's actually a moment that you can choose to hold on to something or to learn something new. And the pathway to learning something new is to be curious about the thing that's causing you a little discomfort or resistance or angst. Um, We'll talk more about the breakouts later, but I'm just going to mention right now that we also invite folks participating in any of our activities, in particular in unfacilitated breakouts, to make space for everyone to engage. It's easy for a few people to do a lot of talking and other folks to sort of fade into the woodwork. And we're inviting everyone participating to really be conscious of how you're showing up. If you're showing up as someone vocal and energetic, maybe, take a step back, tone it down a little, make space for other folks. And if you're showing up feeling a little quiet or less energetic, maybe challenge yourself to lean in and hold space for yourself. I also want to take a moment to remind everyone that tribes and tribal perspectives in California are very diverse. You're hearing from three tribal leaders. You're hearing their perspectives. I want to invite folks and encourage, and gosh, if only I could require that you do not overgeneralize. Always reach out to the appropriate tribe or tribal leaders for whatever work you are doing. I know sometimes it's complicated to figure out who. Ask for help. But please listen to this discussion as three tribal leaders sharing with each other their perspectives, their experiences, etc. So the session is it's a little bit, I think, unique. We have designed the session so that all of us are like the proverbial flies on the wall. We are going to not allow anything in the chat. And we're going to listen. We all of us who are not on the panel are going to sort of be out of the way, a little bit invisible. And we've invited our three panelists to speak to each other like they were, sitting around a table having coffee together or tea, or and that creates a different kind of dynamic, a different kind of uh, space, and a different conversation. So hopefully we can all honor that. We will have a Google document that Alyssa will put in the chat where you can write out your questions. So feel free to jump over to that document and write down your questions. You can write the question and then add your name and organization. We will not, we won't be answering, or the panel won't be answering those questions during the discussion. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the discussion. So don't feel bad if you've written a question and you feel like, how come nobody's looking at it? How come nobody's answering it? I also am pretty certain, because of the size of the workshop, that we will not have time for all the questions. We're going to leave it to the panelists to select which ones that they would like to take a moment to answer. Um, I think that's everything in my opening. Any from our panelists, anything else that I didn't say that you would like me to say, or from Joan or Alyssa? All right. Well, then I'm going to hand it off to Trina.
All right, Sasakari Nikki Huscom. My name is Trina Cunningham, and I am Mountain Maidu. I am a member of Enterprise Rancheria, which is located in Oroville, California. But the complexity of being an adopted member of a federally recognized tribe is intriguing and very not understood by most people, and um, I'm included in that. Being Mountain Maidu, Enterprise Rancheria tribal homelands don't cover the area that I'm in. And so the majority of the time I'm represented as an unfederally recognized tribal member in my own homelands, and which is interesting. So my tribal homelands are an incredible dynamic place, as everybody's homelands are. But it's the southernmost of the Sierra Cascade Mountain Range, the northernmost of the Sierra Nevada Mountain Range, the westernmost of the Great Basin, and just to the west and south is the Sacramento Valley. And so it's an incredibly dynamic area. And in the hundreds and thousands of years prior to us being exactly where we are right now, it was also seen as a convening area. So we had, and we hosted, and this homeland hosted for many years. It was a major trading area. And so a lot of tribes have names and remembrances of our homelands. And today, when archaeologists date artifacts, they find artifacts from a long ways away. And the oldest ones that I've found dated, like the obsidian hydrodating, were like 9,600 years ago from southern Nevada, which is very intriguing. But I'm really honored to be here. I'm appreciative of the Watershed Solutions Network for convening this event, and I'm really honored to meet Emily and Jazzmyn through this way, and hopefully someday in person, and looking forward to this conversation today.
Thank you, Trina. Michuksasa Kananguya Hente Jazzmyn. Hello, my name is Jazzmyn Gegere. I am a tribal member for the Southern Sierra Miwuk Nation, also known as the American Indian Council, Mariposa County. Our traditional homelands sit at the base of the Sierra Nevada mountain range and up into Yosemite National Park is one of the places that we call home. And I am very excited to be here and to be able to sit in the same space as Emily and Trina and Debbie. Again, thank you for putting this together. And Alyssa, thanks for facilitating. Joan, you as well. And I'm really excited to get this conversation started. Seems like it's a hot topic. So, Emily.
Okay. Good afternoon. And Emily Burgueno, Nechuhi, Mates Kunang Kopai, Napum Sinyal Kudun Kopai, and Pipa Napum hits me up McKenue. Inya Churchech Chesh Sapur Napum Matmoche. So hello everybody, my name is Emily Burgueno. I come from the Esquanan village, also known as the Iipay Nation of Santa Ysabel, where I'm a tribal enrolled citizen. And we're located there in North County, San Diego, in the foothills and top of the mountain there, between 3,000 and 5,000 elevation. So I also mentioned I come from Sinalcatoon village, which is the Manzanita Band of the Kumeyaay Nation on my father's side. And that's located in East County, San Diego, in the high desert, around same about 4,000 elevation. I also mentioned my families. I honor them. My Paipa and Hesmiap, Mekeniwe, my families. And then I also mentioned the Churchesh Chesh Sapur, the strong-hearted work, which I carry for conversation. But I do carry that strong heart with me. And I also mentioned lastly the philosophy of Matmoche, or love of the land, in which I was raised and carry my cultural values and livelihood. And so that's my introduction, and I share that in our language, the Iipay, the northern dialect of the Iipay language. I come from the Kumeyaay Nation. For those who aren't familiar, the Kumeyaay Nation is made of 12 federally recognized bands or tribal nations here in San Diego County. Our homelands span from the ocean, mountains, foothills, and desert. And you won't find too many of the reservations or bands on the coast, and that's because we were systematically the 12 bands are united, in many ways. And one of the ways I'll share, a few of the ways I'll share later. But one of them being the Kumeyaay Diegueno Land Conservancy, which is an executive board of the Kumeyaay Nation on matters of traditional Kumeyaay land conservation, or excuse me, traditional Kumeyaay ecological knowledge and land conservation as we define it and know it. So I have the honor for the past 2 years now of being chairwoman for the board, or for the Conservancy, along with the 12 delegated board members and alternates. So our board is made up of 10, excuse me, I mentioned 12, but it's actually 10. 10 of the 12 bands that are united under KDLC, which is our acronym. So I'll share that much in my introduction, but I'm so excited to share about the work we do together.
I apologize for breaking in quickly, but Emily, you are breaking up just a little bit. I don't know if you're moving closer or farther from a signal, but just so you know. Did
Yeah, I'm
y'all,
done.
yeah, did y'all want me to ask you a question to kick it off, or do one of you have a question for the others?
So maybe I can just quickly shed a little light how I was introduced with WSN real quick. I won't spend too much time, but we were introduced through the forest gatherings that our respected neighbors held with La Jolla Band of Mission Indians. So that's how we got connected with Debbie, and then we were able to facilitate one within our homelands here in Ahaquiyamuk or Cuyamaca Rancho State Park. And it was through that forest gathering that we got together, with local community, even neighboring tribal nations, and local, state, and federal agency folk came that day. And it was a really meaningful time together. It was during, the colder weather. So it showed, the folks that are really willing to get a little bit uncomfortable and really ground themselves in their humanness, not necessarily be in our office space or on these Zoom calls all the time, right? But actually getting to know each other and the land that we're actually always either serving or discussing and trying to protect. So I did want to shed a quick light on that because there was a lot of effort that went into that. And, you know, we're excited to share some announcements later on this month. Yeah, service.
And I can add to that as I I I got involved with Watershed Solutions Network. I actually met Debbie Franco when she worked with the governor's office in I had been invited with a small group of people to by invitation only event in South Lake Tahoe to really brainstorm some specific issues, and had met her there, and then had continued dialogue on different regional issues through the state. And at one point, she'd asked me if I knew of any way to bring some of the tribal issues together with some of the legislative and urban issues. And I said, absolutely. We had convened, we being myself, some of my tribal community, and educational institutions, nonprofits, agencies, a TEK gathering years before that, which was incredibly successful on the landscape. And people were like, we want to do this again. Um, and so I said, why don't we already have the framework from that, and we have people that really want to help and make it happen. And so within just a couple of months, we were able to put together this gathering with her help from the governor's office and a lot of the same people, the U.S. Forest Service, CAL FIRE, the tribal elders, youth, higher education on the landscape. For me, also, I had gone back to school because the frustration of our ancestral language and working with our elders and Western science, I knew I needed to be a bridge between Western education and culture and my own cultural knowledge. And so I went back to college, and I was drowning in academia. And I was like, I called somebody I knew and said, "Hey, is there anything tribal going on? I just need to be around tribal people that speak that language and culture." And he said, "Yeah, there's a conference in Las Vegas that I can get you to." And I'm like, "No, I'm gonna die. I need to be on the land." And and um and so that's really how that formulated. It's like, and when Debbie asked that, I said, "Yeah, let's do it on the land." And so we put that together. And so that was, as she says, the first forest gathering. And that's how that came together. And we had it in Genesee Valley, Yatoma Tokoyo, where part of my family's from, and where our last roundhouse, because of the privatization of property. And so our last cultural ceremonial house, it was on the same, what's considered private property now. It's one of the private property owners was so gracious and let us have it on their private property, which was amazing, and even helped pay for some of the food and everything. And so to have legislative people with tribal elders and youth and other people in a place that didn't get cell reception, we had to bring in porta potties and food there. And there was a wildfire nearby, so there was some smoke. And then we got lightning strikes and thunder. We even got a huge rainstorm and hail. We called in wildfires. It was like 104, 107 degrees. So before those hailstorms and rain started, we were melting down with heat. And so everybody got to really experience the land and the different moods in the season. And it really changed. I remember a man from the Public Policy Institute of California being there, and another man from another agency being there. And once we were able to have a campfire safely in August, saying, I need to rethink everything I ever thought I knew. And I knew that was a win. And so tribal communities, we do things differently. And when we get to express that and partner with people from the places and let the land speak for itself, it can change it can really change how people think. I'm just, Debbie had invited me to each of Emily's and Jazzmyn's communities where these events were happening, and just because of personal reasons and the timing, I wasn't able to attend, but I do look forward to other events.
That would have been wonderful. That would have been very fun. But yeah, we thanks to Bill, who is attending today, former council member of the Southern Sierra Miwuk Nation. He is actually the one who introduced me to Debbie, and started getting the Bull Creek gathering together out in Coulterville, along Bull Creek, and it was beautiful. And I thank you both for that.
And for the so the forest gathering that we hosted last year, we reflected the title of the gathering towards the village that we held it in. So it was called Kumeyaay, Matayam being, gathering of energy. And so it's really important for our nation to include not just the language, but those to share those significances, because we can read that title or that gathering name, but if we don't understand it or take away from it, then it's just a title, a language that is not being understood. So we make sure to share these teachings when we include our cultural heritage or significances. And it had been over 10 years actually that our community, our nation, gathered in that place, Kumeyaay, the village of Kumeyaay. And it was through, my teachers, my leaders, some of them that had passed on now, that, made that happen. And, oh, sorry, the AC kicked on right here. So, I find myself as a Kumeyaay woman, and, I always heard that term full circle being shared. And it's not until you actually live it and experience it that you know that true meaning. Because sure, we know what a circle looks like. We know, to take a full lap. But those full circle moments of seeing my teachers, my leaders, create these safe spaces for gatherings, for teachings, for ultimately, without even naming it, for healing. And, I find myself doing that, and not necessarily right through a 9 to 5, but through a commitment that, was instilled into me through what I mentioned earlier of Matmohe, or love of the land. And so the executive boards I had mentioned before, I tend to, reflect on them and acknowledge them, because it's through not only our tribal governance, through tribal council, but it's through also the support and unity through these boards that our nation has advanced. I just heard yesterday on a call from a UC associate saying, how the Kumeyaay Nation, when it comes to repatriation and protecting our ancestors, our artifacts, our cultural landscapes, how unified we are. And I want to acknowledge that, because it's really important. These systems, these colonial systems, were put in place for us to destroy each other. But it's through Matmohe, through love of the land, through our, our teachings that ground us, that keep us unified. It's those colonial influences that, can disturb these systems, whether it's our kinship or our ecosystems, right? That we see that. So I find myself reflecting a little bit more, maybe because I am in mourning, and mourning my teacher. But I find myself really accepting that role too, because this is a role like you would never catch me a day in my life calling like myself a leader, right? That is a role that has been put onto me because of my actions, not because of my words or who I know or how much money I have or per capita I have. It's what, it's because not only what I know culturally, but what I do with it. I don't gatekeep it. I was taught that these songs, these languages are not ours, like ours to own, but ours to steward with respect and dignity. Um, and so that's, the role I find myself. And it's through, Mutmohe that has that has very much honestly led my professional commitments. And because before committing to the Conservancy, I was a committed cultural monitor, or excuse me, I was actually a committed cultural resource manager in the museum field. And before that, I was a cultural monitor. But it was, my the Mutmohe that kept me, balanced in each of those responsibilities through the knowledge and approach, I guess you can say, that I was taught to give. So I wanted to share that much. And we do have some exciting things ahead of us for KDLC this year. One, specifically, because I did mention, the language, the importance of our traditional languages, because these languages, they tell stories, and that's our remembrance. That's our original, right? Our original blueprint, as I come to interpret it. And one of the efforts from KDLC for the past I would say 10 years now, because KDLC was established in 2005. So we've been unified through nonprofit, for 20 years now. But that, that's just through a nonprofit. We're very much unified beyond that. So it's only been half of our establishment that they've been going towards educating on renaming some of the disrespectful terms. I'm sure some of you all are familiar. I don't need to name them, but one of them, here you wouldn't consider disrespectful because it was just named after a person. But if you dig and you learn about that person, you learn that they're a Confederate soldier who never even visited the mountain here. That was named after him. So it was the locals that, romanticized a Confederate soldier, being that it is in what, is now a gold mining, romanticized town, but originally a Kumeyaay village. They named that mountain because they idolized that person. And with KDLC's effort, they highlighted that and acknowledged the original term and the significance of that term, and the history throughout the disturbance of the area. And it wasn't just until December that we were, approved for that, and things like that. It would be a lot harder. I can't say they can't get done, because I'm not going to say no to anyone. You try as much as you can, but I believe they wouldn't get done in the way they do, or in the time they do, if we weren't unified, because San Diego is one of the most diverse areas, not just in California, but the United States. We do have ocean, mountain, and desert. And so if you can think about the land, just think about the people like that. We're a very diverse people, but what keeps us unified is matmohe, our love of the land. And that's because we initially, right, identify with the land. If you learn about the terms body and land, you learn about how intertwined they are. So I'll pause there because I could talk about language all day. It teaches me so much.
Thank you, Emily. You're so passionate. I love that. That brought up so many topics in my mind. I was kind of contemplating, Jazzmyn, how you felt about some of that as well.
Yeah, the same for me. There were multiple points in which I could relate, and it's this has been the like overarching question that I've had, since I was gifted this responsibility of caring for our culture and our history and things like that. And the fundamental understanding and the way that we've been raised and the stories we've been told, and the way that we were taught to work with the land and not own it or on it. I wonder, I do see that as one of the largest, I don't want to say barriers or roadblocks, but that's one of the largest gaps that need to be bridged. And I am unsure if that's possible, with others who haven't been raised within our culture and things like that. But I know I continue to try every day, through connection, through in-person connection. Emily, I think that is why it's, like you mentioned, so very important to meet as people on the land, because you have that very human experience together. No agenda, no computers, no walls containing conversation and the flow and everything like that. So yeah, that's one of the biggest things that I have noticed and I have seen. Trina, you probably have similar thoughts or experiences.
Yeah, I definitely, just at the age that I am right now, and my dad, both of my parents passed away in 2023, within a few months of each other. And my mom was raised in Southern California in LA County, and she was married to my dad for 50 years and knew the homeland as much as anybody, really. The hunting places, the camping places, and carried the culture. And so that loss was tremendous. But he'd asked me at one point, "What do you do?" And I was like, "I'm trying to." Well, we grew up without knowing the language because he grew up in the boarding school era. His parents, his father, and his grandparents had gone through the boarding school. So when my late younger brother had started really learning the language, he got kind of upset. "Why are you doing that? You shouldn't be doing that. That's gone." And so my brother and our generation had to really put a concerted effort to bring, I guess bring back, but to learn what we could of the language and to see it starting to prosper with the next generations is so exciting. Just that it feels like my generation has been picking up those pieces and trying to put them together, and to have the next generations, my children, who are in their 20s and 30s now, coming along and holding them and going with them and carrying them forward, is so exciting. But there's so many things that are broken still, like I called the Native American Heritage Commission a few years ago when I was working for a tribal nonprofit, and we weren't getting consultation letters because we're not on the list. And it's like, well, you can't be on the list. You're not a federally recognized tribe. And it's like, well, we are an intertribal nonprofit. We represent 7 different tribal organizations in our homelands, and none of us are federally recognized. And it's like, well, too bad you're not on the list. You can't be. And it's just to not be on a state list for consultation when there's still our family burial sites. There still are our sacred sites. They're still our ceremonial sites. We still know, we still know that a lot of the archaeology or hunting grounds or, all of those things is really, really frustrating. One kind of thing that stands out to me that I did want to share today of an example of not being a federally recognized tribe in our own nation and some of the effects is, and part of the reason I brought up my dad was that was maybe 10 or 12 years ago, we started seeing elk back in our homelands. And people are like, hey, we heard an elk bugle. And it's like, what? And so I've listened, and my dad was like, I heard an elk bugle. I want to see one. And he never got to see one before he passed away a couple of years ago. But other people are like, yeah, we saw, a whole herd and there were babies and everything. And and so we've been so excited about it. And now the populations are depleting again because of the reintroduction of wolves. And and so we're like, wait, you reintroduced a predatory pack, a predatory animal, while other things were being reestablished. So now the things that are being reestablished are going to become extinct. And a sacred animal, the wolf, is going to be treated like vermin. And so instead of consulting with the tribal communities and really looking at ecosystem balance, you created a scenario that is opposition, and you've created more imbalance and even animosity towards the sacred. And that's that's an example, but it's almost how they treat us. If we even bring up the idea of reestablishing fisheries, around water rights or stuff, and it's like, well, it's not, there's fisheries economies that are being depleted also through this. So it's not just a tribal issue. So there's resources when you talk about that. So you've got the monetary things like and policy issues. But as tribal people in our own homelands, we want to see our communities thrive. We have our creation stories. If you want to, you call it a blueprint. If you call it our tribal constitutions, our original instructions, whatever you call it, we still need to adhere to them, whether the state, the federal government recognizes it. It's still our what we need to adhere to. And the more tools that we are given to be able to do that, to follow, the more we can help our own communities. And when those tools are taken away, that's when things get so out of balance that everybody suffers.
Yeah, I like what you mentioned about the generations, because a few years ago I was observing that, my mom, her mom, my dad, his dad, they were all surviving, responding right to their environments. And thankfully there were those pockets, right? Moments of being able, to thrive. But from the stories I've heard, it was a lot of surviving, more than anything. And when it's, my generation and so forth, we have a lot more opportunities to thrive. And that's what I've been taught is, and not just told, right? When I say been taught, but shown this, to create spaces to thrive together. My Lahunt uncle created space for the youth at that time in the late 90s to come learn the songs, not necessarily come make a gourd right away, but just come learn the songs. And then the same with the girls, to come learn the songs. Maybe not hone in right away on all the dance steps because there's single step, double, triple. If you're advanced, quadruple, hey. If you're dancing kuyas, hey. But yeah, it was just to just be immersed in, like you mentioned, what isn't necessarily being carried into the homes, because instead of being able to carry the culture forward or the language forward or even our family names forward, right? Because a lot of our grandparents even changed their last names to survive, to either reflect, Spanish or other. But, for my family, it was more Spanish, being closer to the border here. Yeah, so creating those spaces to be immersed in what other, if it's, what you know or what you don't know because it's not in your home. And yeah, instilling those teachings into, my role as, an executive board member on a nonprofit, but ultimately as an auntie, right? Because, that's my role as well. That's my unpaid role. Hey, no. No matter where I go, is carrying that auntie energy, that love, that nourishment, that matriarchal healing that a lot of us matriarchs have with me, because that is special. Just like the men have their medicine, it's special. It's a balance. And so in order to bring forth that balance, we have to remind our nation, our people here, of those roles, not necessarily out of ego or entitlement, like, oh, this is a role, so you have to take it, right? But this is more of a responsibility in which, your grandpa was a healer, so maybe that's something you may want to take on and continue, because it's one, within your lineage, and two, yeah, I can't really share more, but it's not necessarily like for how you go to medical school and get your doctor, PhD. That's not necessarily how the healers work. You can't really just obtain it like that. It has to be within you. It has to come from your family. Is how I was shown or taught. So just kind of reminding our people of those responsibilities within those roles, because um, a lot is put on to Native women, and we want to get it done, so we're gonna say yeah. But it shouldn't be like that. It should be a balance. We shouldn't be shopping, preparing the meals, cleaning up the kitchen, but also having to attend the meeting, right? There should be some balance in there. And that's just, one role, responsibility. So yeah, there's, for right now, because of the state of, our societies, the world, I'm really reflecting on the resources we have, right? IHC, the Indian Health Clinic, and so forth, whatever resources, educational resources we may have. And do those resources, are they reflecting that colonial influence, or are they uplifting our cultural values? So that is something I personally am like centering this year, because we do get caught up in that second world, as I was taught. There's our spiritual world, which includes our culture, our language, and that second colonial world where we have to live in, talk English. If you want to, make it out there, we have to have a trade or a degree or some type of skill, right? All these checks boxes. So there's a balance between who we are and who we have to be. So that's kind of what I'm really, really instilling. Not that I didn't in the past years, but since we're seeing a lot of it getting a little bit more worse and worse, outside of, what's out of our hands, kind of honing in what we do have connection to, not necessarily control, right? But connection to, and really investing in that, not necessarily with our dollar. I mean, sure, that would help, but with our energy or our spirituality or religion, whatever you practice, our physical health, it really makes me happy to see my family choosing their health, because that's, for me, that's self-determination in itself. And that's, what that's completely what we're not supposed to be doing. So, it could be little things that mean the most, from my point of view, where I'm sitting, and I'm sitting on a rock. So yeah.
That takes me back to the kind of the idea of the forest gatherings for me. It was generational too, for a purpose, because to be able to have our young people hear what the elders were saying, but to have all these different people from decision makers, private property landowners, neighbors, um, legislative and policy analysts, lobbyists, all in the same room, hearing the same room, the same part of the forest, the meadow, um, the insects and the bees and the rain, and hearing the same conversation at the same time, and so everybody getting to learn that, and what are the structures, what are the being able to identify what we framed as barriers, as the tribal community. It's like, okay, we keep hitting these walls. Why? And then for people to be there in real time that understood those, and they're like, actually, this is an opportunity, because if you see this, and they can explain it to us in real time, and it's like, oh, and so we could create these pathways together in one sitting, over a couple of days, that we didn't even know before, that might have taken us 2 years otherwise. And by the time we left, it's like all of us had such a greater understanding over 2 days of spending time in a forest together and walking down to a creek, um, of having all of those people having a common conversation all at one time, intergenerationally. And the intergenerational didn't have to just be tribal. It could be people's families from these agencies and other things also going, wow, I didn't know this is what you did for work, mom or auntie. This is, wow, maybe this is what I want to do when I grow up, or I'm glad you're doing this and I'm going to do something way different. but but I got to learn this. And so those things are so important. And for me, it's really hard when I get things in the mail saying, what do you think about this proposed logging sale on this site? And my mind is framed like at a forest gathering type of framework, because that's how my mind thinks. I'm thinking about all these people and all of this fluidity, and the wolves and the snakes and the thunderstorms, and then I get a piece of paper. And I'm like, how do I even respond? How do I put this here? And so that also becomes a structure that is difficult. And sometimes I just look at it and I don't even know how to respond. It's just like, I have concerns. Can we go out there? Can we do a field trip where we just invite everybody to go out there at once? Because I also that was my answer to being inclusive, because I don't care what tribe you're from. I don't, you might be a rancher whose mother is 100 years old, and she remembers that baseline from 80 years ago and can help. She knows, she has data in her head from 80 years ago, and you may be the only one that can tell that story. And when you can bring that conversation in, that person, that rancher, may be the only one that can bring that part of that data into that conversation. And so that was, for me, another answer to being inclusive in a way that um, didn't feel valued in the world at that time that I was living in.
that reminds me of an experience when it was like either 2020 or 2021, when I reached out to one of my elders and wanted to like sit down with her and ask her to teach me the language because she's a fluent speaker from our res, and she's not the oldest one though, the oldest fluent speaker. So out of respect, she was like, well, it's supposed to be the oldest, reminding me of the teachings. And so she pretty much she sent me, to another elder, and I went to her, same thing. When I asked her, they I can't say all of them do, but some of the elders that I've talked with, like, they sometimes doubt themselves. And that is that colonial influence. Some of it may be memory loss, but a lot of it is that colonial influence, of not knowing it all, right? Because that's, one of the responses I got. Well, I don't know it. I don't know all the language, so who am I to teach? But like you said, Trina, those stories of what you do know are really important and can hold that key to unlocking, something else, even if it is just that something else is something, again, something small. It's not that full story or that full teaching, but it's, what my brother helped me understand as the ripple effect. Either when you're doing something or you're learning something, it ripples. It doesn't stay, right? Because our energy is continuing flowing. We're continually moving, having action, so forth. So yeah, it's like, and now she's in a place a couple years later, she's teaching, thankfully, but at the time she told me no. Because yeah, she wasn't confident in herself, and I completely understood that, because same girl, same. But she knows a lot more, a lot more. She's had tons, she is one of the oldest elders on our res, so she has a ton of life experience than myself. So I'm grateful she's, there now, where she's gotten to that space or that comfortability to teach. And, they are putting forth that dictionary that my cousin's doing. And that's that ripple effect, It's just that dictionary will forever be that a resource, not the resource, but a resource for our people alongside our teachers. Because these feasible documents, audio, like, we can't have that without our original teachers, which, is our families. And that's who ties us to creation. So I really appreciate the advancements of technology. Some of the songs I wouldn't even been able to hear without hearing it on a cassette tape or a DVD, and now phones. So, it's much needed, the technology, but we have to have these respectful boundaries on them too, because then, there's possible of appropriation, capitalization without consent or respect. So just wanted to highlight that in the world of AI.
Yeah, Trina, I wanted to mention or kind of show my relationship when I get project consultation notifications, and that feeling of just like overwhelmed, because I don't think it's understood the vast view in which we have to look at things, or we were taught to look at things, because like you mentioned, it's the birds, it's the wolves, it's the bees, it's the water, it's the plants, it's the food, it's the spiritual significance of the place. Like, not only do we have to make sure that the land is preserved and protected, we also have to run it through all of our elders because we don't know everything. And so it's a huge, huge feat. And, you know, we get so many consultation requests per day via email and post mail. And it is a lot. And I hope that, you know, agencies, state, local, federal, they understand what a large scale we're having to work on with that. Yeah. So
And no response doesn't mean it's not a priority, right? Because capacity is also a factor in the tribal consultation requests. Like you mentioned, there's various projects that we're getting requests from agencies that are requesting, you know, planning, you know, every angle. So it's not about a priority, but a capacity. I always stress that because it's all, you know, here in San Diego, I remind them like it's all Kumeyaay land. So of course we're going to be interested. It's the time you're reaching out in the matter you're reaching out and who you're reaching out to. Because initially they're compliant, they have to reach out to our governments. They're if not, they're not in compliance, right? And then how I mentioned the executive boards, alongside meeting your compliance, they can also be reaching out down here. I'm referring to the executive boards that, you know, are appropriate for whatever is the request, because the people on those boards, you know, if not half or more are tribal council members. But every delegate is working with their tribal council on these matters. So that's how we keep a line of functionality and communication, but doesn't mean we respond to all of them. Like Jazzmyn said, there's too many to respond. I'll just say that. And we're 12 bands federally recognized, and that's still not enough to respond to every tribal consultation request.
Thank you for that. That really emphasizes that for those of us that aren't recognized, we're not 12 bands, and a lot of times it's just one or two of us that are also holding down jobs and that don't have anything to do with this or doing other things. And if we had a loss in our family or had the flu or our son had a broken arm and spent a night in the ER or whatever it is, you know, yeah, that just went out the window. That response or a few responses just went out the window. And then comes the thing where we actually did take the time. We went out and helped flag the area, and then we go to follow up, and the area had activity anyway in it, and the site was damaged because the workers that did the work didn't understand the flagging, and so then that's something that I ran into quite a lot post Dixie Fire. The Dixie Fire that burned through our homelands in 2021 was the single largest wildfire in California state history, and the wildfire recovery efforts, we haven't been able to keep up with all of the post wildfire recovery efforts. It was hard enough to, you know, the loss of animal life, habitat, watershed, you know, trees, the destruction and damage to actual water because of the high amount of nitrates going into the water, and now the sedimentation and erosion, and then the built environment, burnt things going into the water, and it's been way more than anybody could respond to, and it's been very frustrating not to have more comprehensive planning and a way to engage and things like that. And that's something that I would ask anybody in leadership position or decision-making positions on this call in your networks to help figure out. We've got FEMA, we've got other efforts, but what does that look like, in these larger scale catastrophes? But what does it mean when you scale it down to smaller communities and to watersheds and to drinking water supply? And how do you engage community response? It's a very real thing. And I also will say that the watershed that I'm in is the headwaters of the state water supply. And so that impact at the headwaters and at the source of the state water supply. And so water from here goes all the way down to you, Emily. It really does matter to the whole state, and the decisions that are made or not made and the input, it does matter in finding ways to do that. It really does matter, and it affects, even though we are a small rural population, those decisions affect millions of people and species.
I've heard, because meeting different folks, I've heard, them get more familiar that, yeah, we are busy, myself specifically, oh, I know you're busy, so I didn't reach out. Like, that should never be a fact. They should never be choosing that choice for myself or any tribe or tribal leader or whoever. Because that outreach is what is needed, but it's about finding out which communication line works best for which tribal nation, point of contact, right? But since you brought up fire, I did wanted to mention down here there was the Cedar Fire, and that really showed, the lack of access to what are supposed to be readily available resources by the federal government, specifically FEMA. And, I won't break it down historically, what happened and event by event, but thankfully the tribal leaders at the time unified and saw the need to create, a resource for the tribes for disaster preparedness and wildfire relief. And so with the Intertribal Long-Term Recovery Foundation, that was one, a pathway for that for Southern California tribes here in San Diego. That's not speaking to, Riverside, and so forth, other counties. They do intertribal work, but they serve, specifically San Diego County and maybe some neighboring. But yeah, the conversation of wildfire is important, but what that conversation often is missing is the education and acknowledgement of cultural fire or burning. And, that's what, when I say that, folks are more familiar with, yes, the land stewardship factor of burning as like management, right? To burn, to manage. But there's also, the ceremonial fires, the other fires. Cultural burning is a ceremonial fire. If you're doing it with the ceremonial leader and all that. But what I'm speaking to are the other ceremonies, which I won't name here since it is being recorded and will be shared, elsewhere. But we do have, ceremonial fires for the folks who do pass on. And I won't explain, but I just wanted to shed a quick light that the cultural burning isn't just the only fire that is special or significant to to Kumeyaay people, but I can't speak for all, but I know there are various California tribes that do cultural burning. Can't name them all, and I definitely can't say all of them do. But for Kumeyaay, we do, and cultural burning has never left our homelands, specifically my family on my dad's side. So he's been burning since he's been 7, and has normalized that for our family. So we didn't really grow up with the clinging of fear when we see fire or even wildfire. We more approach it or understand it with the approach of like respect and dignity, because sure, yes, absolutely, a wildfire, it can be harmful and dangerous, destructive. That is a result, though, of lack of respect of fire, right? Somebody or something, right? Somebody was either negligent in whatever started that fire, or whatever structure, maybe, example, telephone pole, since SDG&E loves to turn off the power in East County when the winds are going due to fire risk. So, for example, a telephone pole sparks a fire. That's, probably because either, their wires are not up to date, or the tree isn't managed where the pole is. So there's those factors. Fire, for me, for us, Kumeyaay is a spirit. It's a relative, just like water is. So that's how we know it, as a family member, as a teacher. So that's how we approach it. We don't just approach it disrespectfully. Yeah, splashing in puddles, right? It's fun. But you won't, see me doing it in a disrespectful way, right? Because there's an approach to do that, like to have joy, right? But not to splash people who don't want to be splashed, right? Having respect. So, or like polluting, right? You won't see me polluting a watershed because I have respect. So, you won't see me playing with fire because I have respect for fire. I know when, to apply fire on the ground or elsewhere. And, we have been criminalized for this cultural practice since the conquistadors came to the coastline and observed those communication fire lines along the coast and mountain peaks, and, fire being related or associated with hell, right? Because of the California mission slave system influence a lot of the perspective and understandings here. So fire, no good. But for fire, for us, it's part of our life, right? It's who we are. It's how we identify. Because without it, you see the overgrowth, you see the lack of certain native seed species germinating because they do require fire. You see the lack of the willow growing, the certain, branches we need for basketry or utilitarian things. So, yeah, there's also, you know, it's the spiritual, right? Grounding is why it's so important. It's not what it does for us because it's so important. The word for fire in Kumeyaay or Iipay, ow. The word for spirit, matao, and that's the body's fire. So that is the significance of, our spirit and the correlation of fire and energy. So I could talk all day about fire too, but I won't. But it is very special. We have a planned cultural burn in the fall this year. And that's through the land stewardship and nursery training that we're facilitating for the tribal nations here in San Diego County. And And that's, in partnership with the executive boards that I was talking about previously. I didn't name them all because it's just, we would need another hour. But it's, the executive Kumeyaay boards, the nation, and the RCD, the Resource Conservation District, that is, came together to facilitate this, to serve the tribes on matters of, tribal nursery priorities. And we developed a whole curriculum to serve those priorities, because we cannot use, a colonial influence curriculum that doesn't serve us, because, it requires all these things, and we don't have necessarily all these resources that they're going to be teaching us about. So yeah, it was pretty amazing to realign that with Joel and Olivia, and the attending, participating executive board members. Right now, we're looking forward to facilitating the second session in the late winter with, we have a few partners. We'll actually be here where I'm sitting, at the Kumeyaay Community College, where we're going to be with the Sakan Cultural Center, visiting a non-native, non-tribal partner, a new partner. So we're excited, down in South Bay. And then we're also working with the California State Parks along the coast. So there's a lot going into it, and that's what requires, right, that space I was talking about earlier, about creating these spaces for our people and what all goes into it. Because there's not a template. The like I said earlier, the blueprint or the grounding is our teaching, our cultural values. But we are adapted people, just like the land. We reflect the land. The land is very adapted. So yeah, I just wanted to share that much about cultural burning. A little, I barely didn't even shed a light about, some of the programming we have for the nation here. And, we do look forward to providing some of that programming for, our non-tribal partners and relatives, after sharing those, programming with our neighbor tribal nations. But to be very transparent, we're not there yet, because those spaces require, certain things. And, we could take the training that we set the curriculum up for our people, but we also have to add the factor, like a whole module on cultural humility. And that's a whole curriculum in itself, right? As some of the folks on the call know. So yeah, we want to make this learning experience and grow, together. But as I was taught, we start, within our home, and grow from there. So we look forward to expanding this year, though.
I did. I really, when you said, Emily, about creating the space, that really stuck out to me, because I don't think that agencies and tribes, and even from, tribal government to tribal organization, whomever, we don't operate on the same timeline. And so I think creating the space, or giving the space to be able to, especially in regards to like consultation, giving the space to be able to, have those site visits or make determinations, or, include your elders, and, everything like that, everything that needs to be done on our end. Yeah, creating the space and the time to be able to do that effectively and in a meaningful way, maybe wouldn't be so depleting for us, because I know that we've talked about that before. And I think that'd be cool to share, because Emily, you said it really well, if you're open.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of how I mentioned earlier, about really honing in what I'm connected to, and not, and this is just a commitment to myself, because yeah, over the past few years I did, a lot of, I mean, I've been an advocate not by choice. I was raised in it. So now I am by choice. But yeah, over the past couple years, I've been advocating. I even found myself at Washington, D.C. by choice, but advocating for what I was talking about earlier, cultural burning, in through policy, through the Farm Bill, and sharing, through our state representatives and all their titles, Congress folks, that how important it is to us, because their definition of agriculture, right, is a little bit different than ours. And it was through not just advocating through policy, but I even advocated through state, through making a report to submit to the governor and legislator on, agricultural land equity and land access and equity. Excuse me. It's been a minute since I attended that meeting. But it was through that lens I was able to advocate again through our lens, through traditional ecological knowledge, and define that. What does that mean, in the sense of agriculture, and how do those agricultural resources include traditional ecological knowledge, our teachings, our languages, our stories, our management and stewardship practices, because it didn't, and it still doesn't, to this day. We continue to advocate, but yeah, I did mention earlier that everybody, right, has that role, and Native women tend to a little bit overcommit and intention of getting it done. So this year, really investing right into what we're building with KDLC, with the Kumeyaay Nation, in general, not just the Land Conservancy, which I chair, but our nation in general. We had some really hard losses in my family this past winter. So that, in itself for us is a ceremony, being in mourning for a year. I have to really limit myself now, not really by choice, but by spiritual law. Really hone in on what I'm doing and how I carry my energy. But what Jazzmyn, is referring to is like that burnout, right? That I'm sure a lot of, if not all, you can kind of relate to is, yeah. But yeah, I'm still working on that. I hope you weren't leaning towards me for some type of like answer.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to some of those answers from you.
I mean, really being on the land is my answer always. That's what grounds me, and that's who I am, is the land. Like, I'm here on this rock because I don't really enjoy Zoom meetings all the time, having a camera in my face. Usually my camera is off most of my meetings. So I got where I'm comfortable under this beautiful oak and near these relatives, because I'm grounded out here. Like, that's my answer. If I had to share an answer, is to, reconnect with yourself, which is ultimately, the natural outside. Yeah, your environment.
I'm with you on that. I always like to loop the kids in too. That always refills my cup in a way that is just, I can't explain it.
Yeah. 2 years ago, I committed each month to my youth and taking them out. And that was just my personal goal, right? I I have a big head, so I don't wear hats, but I use that metaphor. I wear many hats. But it was just my personal goal to share with the youth because I love them. They're all my family, my little cousins there. So I reached out to the youth coordinator, like, I'm a plant nerd. I want to teach them, what I know. And so we took them 2 years ago each month to a different spot because where I'm from, yeah, it's like the foothills, the valley, up top the mountain, where it's headwaters of 5 watersheds in San Diego and one that leads into Imperial County. And on the other side of the mountain is, yeah, that high desert where, is the mesquite, the creosote grows. So we have a very vast environment, ecosystems where just my res is, right? Not just San Diego, but just my res. So was able to take them, different areas. And when we took them over the mountain, I want to say almost all of them, but I can't say all of them, was their first time being over on the San Felipe side. Because, yeah, a lot of us just stay where we're comfortable, right? Especially us who were pushed in on these reservations. To me, they're like concentration camp, these reservation lines. I'm not talking about the land per se, but the idea, right, of a reservation. The concentration camps were reflected by the reservation system. So a lot of our people have the mindset of that's their comfort. They can't leave there because that's where where we're allowed, if, in a sense. So it was really exciting to see, to take them out of their comfortability, but, on our homelands. So just wanted to share that quick little story.
I'm really sorry to intervene here, but I want to thank all three of you for so generously sharing with the group. I think we should shift to Q&A. I'm gonna hand it back to all three of you. Maybe I'm gonna guess, Emily, you might not. Are you able to see the questions, or should I just read them real quick?
I could see them.
Okay, great.
I did. I'll just start with the first one because it's intriguing. It's kind of highlighting, the UC system here in California and how to strengthen those connections with local tribal members as UC associates are researching and maybe facilitating, work in traditional homelands. So, yeah, so with the UC system, I think maybe putting up a mirror would work well, would be my first response, like learning about said university or institution that you're talking about. I don't really want to name it because I can read it on the Google Doc, everybody can. But, this is valid for any of the UCs to really put a mirror up, reflect about the history, not reflect, but learn about the history and harm, intentional harm, right? This isn't oopsie, I made a poopsie harm. This is intentional erasure and dehumanization that these UC systems have and are still committing on California tribal nations. So let's start there. Like educating oneself. Because, yeah, I get a lot of folks from UCSD who want to work on these cool events, but have no idea the genocide their institution is committing on the Kumeyaay Nation and the destruction their institution is committing on Kumeyaay coasts, excuse me. So it's puts me in a predicament because me as wanting to like represent and interface to represent respectfully, but also I'm not trying to be tokenized, dehumanized as we see associates, relatives being at these UCs without any acknowledgement of what's happening behind the curtain. So to me, right, these photo opportunities occurring are great because everything's happening, right? Functioning great. You had a great event, or you had a great workshop, or you had a great project. But, how is this really serving the homeland community? Or is it really serving one's department or ego or project? Like, let's reflect there too. So I think it's really about educating oneself before approaching tribes, and then knowing that, because researchers, academics tend to come with the energy of knowing it all, that you don't know it all, that it's going to be a learning process for everyone. So just having that humility, bringing a little bit of humility rather than status quo to the table, right? When we're talking UC systems, because that's a specific question. But that can also be applied, right, to local, state, federal government agency status. So you can reflect that there too. But there's some really other good questions, so I don't want to spend too much time. I hope that helps, though.
I have a suggestion. And I do think this is a really specific question, and I'm able to answer it in a specific way. I know a lot of, from personal experience, that a lot of the interactions that we've had with other universities has been, like Emily mentioned, in that kind of tokenized way. And so that sets a feeling for, I'll say me, because I don't want to assume that others within the tribe or outside of the tribe and other tribal organizations or governments are feeling the same way. But I think it would be a good idea to just come to us as a human when you don't necessarily need anything. I know that some people are really, really good at this, and others are just very extractive. And that definitely, like I said, sets a tone. Also, I think it would be really beneficial to get together with tribal representatives or, council members who are interested in the project at hand, and also, ask what can be done to kind of help them with, the initiatives that they are working on, or, if they have information that they need answers to, or, anything like that. It needs to be a balance. I know that balance has been a consistent theme throughout, our whole entire workshop. And it's true, because it is. There needs to be a balance in everything. And I think that would be a really good place to start, is to strive for balance, offer more than what you take, and just come in a very, a humble way as a human, not as a professor, not as a, anything like that. But that's what I have for that. I'm happy that question was asked.
You all are welcome to read through the questions and answer anything else you might like to answer. And if not, then we can move to the breakouts.
Yeah, I can just, on the university question, and it kind of goes back to some of the questions, like with consultation, is a lot of us get a lot of questions and inquiries. So be cognizant of that. At the same time, we do want help and we do want accuracy. So as a student, be cognizant of that. And I like that, Jazzmyn, ask what you can do that may be relevant to what we're working on, because there may be things that we're working on right now that we could really use some help in and it would really help us, that you could help further, that would also help your education. And I think that would be my best answer, where I think something I would find the most value of. But at the same time, there are also in the university, there have been times where some of the professors or people in there have people that they go to all the time, and they really don't work with the rest of the community for a variety of different reasons, whether it's comfort level or other reasons. And so sometimes it's okay, do a little Google search and see if there's people in the community that you might be missing just because they're not on your radar. It's like, if you're really interested in water, research the name of the tribe of the homeland you're in, and water issues or cultural burning or whatever it is. And you might be surprised at what comes up. You might find some other links that could be helpful in that work. And then to Rowena's question, I've worked with Rowena Yekwa, U.S. Forest Service Region 5, and helped with some of the tribal strategic plan, helped write some of the tribal strategic plan, but it's still, I think, having regional meetings in each of the communities, kind of like the forest gatherings. And I know it's a huge lift, but if there can be some sort of gatherings, kind of like the forest gatherings, where you have the regional folks, leadership, staff, meet the tribal people from those communities and their families in place, to get to know those connections of some sort, and help have the tribal people help do some of the planning and invitation, could help strengthen some of that communication there.
Yeah, I think it's important, Trina, to know, right, who you're working with. If they are a tribal representative, like an official tribal representative by the tribe, or they a tribal individual, just to know, right? Not saying one is greater than the other. I think that it serves when both, right, can be included. For the Kumeyaay Nation, ultimately, it's the tribe that represents each tribe. No, not an individual can represent, on behalf of the tribe, right? But one individual has, their said individual has their sovereign right to share, right? Just like myself, about my culture, whatever subject may be. But when it comes to tribal consultation requests, that's going to come from said, person, whether that it's the tribal historic preservation officer, if that tribal nation has one, or if they have a cultural resource specialist or manager, or if it's even just, just the, not just, but, or if it's the tribal council that does that response, because it's not going to be an umbrella, right, person or role. It's going to be different on each, for each tribal nation. And that's speaking just within the Kumeyaay Nation. So there's, 100+ tribes here in California. I did, before Debbie, we move on, wanted to acknowledge the last one about the California Department of Farm and Agriculture questions about like recommendations on how to on tribal engagements. I know, they do tribal consultation outreach through the contact list, but like Trina mentioned, it's not a complete list and does not, right, include all of the tribes, meaning the unrecognized tribes. That list is intended for the federally recognized tribes. So it is a resource. So I always say start there for federally recognized. I can't give you any recommendations for unrecognized, and I don't know, right, about the program, if what that looks like, but that's going to be my response because you were asking about engagement and how to help tribes use that program or funds. And I've heard, that I think it was recently that cultural burning was, allowed for that specific, because it's like a healthy soils program. And, the state of California, the CDFA, finally got to the understanding of how cultural burning does benefit and enhance the soil. So I want to say that was included. So getting, sharing that, how that can be utilized for cultural practices such as cultural burning, but not limited to that, right? You can also include traditional water catchment practices and, other things. But I think it's really about one, understanding that, like I said earlier, the definition of agriculture is not always going to be inclusive of traditional ecological knowledge or practices or life ways, however you want to call it. And so ensuring that it is inclusive before you even share it to the tribe, because why even share it to the tribe if it's not going to include what their priorities are going to be? And knowing that red tape that comes with the program, because if it's going to ask the tribe to sign off a waiver of limited sovereign immunity, then I probably wouldn't, recommend it myself as an individual to tribes, because how is that strengthening tribal sovereignty when the state or whoever, the federal government, is asking for these conditions on a program or a grant or funding? So understanding the red tape is also important about your programs.
I just want to offer one more thing. I know we have to go to breakouts, but this is in regards to Empress Holiday's question. One of the things that our tribal nation does on an annual basis and sometimes quarterly with different agencies is we have those meetings. The meetings to discuss, what are our plans for, the following year, check-ins, when they happen on a quarterly basis. And we reciprocate those topics between each other. And it seems to work out really well. It facilitates like a really easy flowing two-way street when it comes to communication, or questions or, upcoming projects and things like that. So I really am an advocate for the regular meetings, whether it, on whatever basis that needs to happen.
Thank you. Thank you all. We express our gratitude. I always feel like there is not sufficient means to reciprocate when tribal leaders show up and share in this manner. It's a vulnerable thing to do, and so I very much deeply appreciate all three of you, and thank you so much for sharing and being open and giving folks the benefit of the doubt, which is sometimes hard to do too.
I know we all have to pop off, so hope everybody had a good time together. Thank you. Yeah,